G'day everyone, it's James Davis, the Director of Academy down here in Pax8, down here in APAC, and I've got Ryan Spillane, or better known as Fuzzy to everyone that knows him, from 360 Consulting joining me. How you doing, Fuzz?
Really well, thanks, James. Yourself?
I'm going not too bad. Busy start to the year, and I'm sure it is for you as well. Glad we could finally get you on here. We talk heaps, so it's good to have you.
Yep, back from holidays and back from another big week and whatnot, and yep, trying to get the good start off to the week.
Well, it's awesome. I'm glad you're spending the time here today, and why I brought you on because we have these conversations always about what's going on in the market, and you're probably one of the few people that see as many MSPs running around the market and get to lift the hood on them. And really just wanted to spend today talking about what's going on in the market around M&A, one of your specialities. And thought I'd open up with a pretty inflammatory question to get it rolling.
Of course you will.
Yeah, we've got to have fun, don't we? So
that's all right.
I hear a lot. People are talking to me when I catch up with them. They're going, "Oh, I think I can get 8 to 10 times multiple for my business." And when I ask them, well, what multiple is that of? They often can't tell me, but they know they can get 8 to 10 times. So what's going on in the market? Can people get 8 to 10 times multiples? I'm assuming they mean EBITDA a lot of the time.
They probably do without often knowing what EBITDA actually means. But yes, someone's just told them they get 8 to 10 times that. And look, let's be honest, it is possible if you're in America. It is possible if you've got a $70 or $80 million business, you can get those types of things. But let's be honest, the target market of of a lot of what we work with are the smaller guys. So if you're talking of Australian or New Zealand, and Australia and New Zealand have different multiples, which we can go through on the call. But yes, if you're talking an MSP or a TSP, sub 5 million revenue or sub 10 million revenue or whatnot, yep, they're not getting anywhere near that. Anywhere between a 3 to a 5 times, and 5 if you're doing something very special. That's what you would have got easily in the back end of, or in 2022. We're now in May 2023 for context of this webinar, or of this video recording. But I can tell you now that the guys that were trying to get 5 are not getting 5 now, and they're back down to about 4.25. So I've got a couple of deals that I work on and a couple of deals that I'm not working on but helping other people. They're going through at 4.25. There's still plenty of deals to go through at 2, 2.5, 3 times multiple. So if you, as I said, it depends on the size, depends on location. So it's quite funny, really. Most Australian, New Zealand companies hear of multiples from the US because it's the biggest market. It's the ones that keep talking and tell you how much you're getting. It's all the big US vendors that talk about the US multiples because that's all they know about, or that's all that they get to see. Where we're in the ANZ or the APAC region, so we get to see what's happening down this neck of the woods. So again, as I said, yeah, you can have a $5 million MSP doing 10% or 20% bottom line, so $500,000 or $1 million EBITDA, and yep, you'll get for something like that, depending on what market you're in. Again, as I said, Sydney or Melbourne, Brisbane, major markets, whatnot, you could easily probably get a 3.5 to 4 times. If you're doing something very special, something different, if you're running a 22, 25% bottom line, you might get 4.25 at the moment of multiple. But again, if you're in New Zealand, that's a different game. So you might get a 6 to an 8 times for that. Whereas in the US, yes, you could get an 8 to 12 times for that same company. So it's quite funny that the same company, depending on where you're located, can get a very different outcome on the multiple.
And why is that, Fuzz?
Look, I think it's. I'm not going to say Aussies can be cheap. I think Aussies just like to prefer a shorter return on investment. I think that's the nicer, politer way of saying it. I think the Americans will happily wait 8 or 10 years before you get an ROI in a business that they buy. Money's a lot cheaper generally up there and a lot more prevalent, a lot easier to get. So yeah, people often, especially in the US, as I said, 8 to 10 years, they'll happily with an ROI, where most Australian companies and Kiwi companies want a much shorter ROI. So I think a lot of people want to buy, if they're buying at a 3 to 4 times multiple, they'll want to actually figure out what optimizations, what costs they can cut. And it's not just about cost cutting, a lot of it's about increasing revenue on that business that they buy. To try and bring that return on investment down to where it's still 2.5 years, which is normally a 2 to 2.5 times EBITDA. But if they're paying over that, then yes, they'll try and try and grow the business, optimize the business or whatnot to try and bring the ROI down. And I think that's just historically what Aussies want to do. Yes, PE and VC money, which we can talk about through the call, that does and has changed quite a few things over the last few years, but I'd say the Kiwis are happy to have a slightly longer ROI versus the Aussies, and as I said, yeah, the Yanks are happy to have this long ROI, which a lot of people would be in and out of a business in Australia for the length of time that they'll get an ROI on something.
Why the multiples dropping at the moment compared to last year?
Look, compared to if you go back, okay, so let's talk over the last few years. Kind of 2020, 2019, it started to heat up quite a lot. 2020, definitely a lot of money started to come in. So you had private equity and venture capital, or as I often say, vulture capital, both actually came into the market. They saw that there was a lot of reoccurring revenue, good margins, good profitability, and they started looking at doing roll-ups of businesses. And hey, I sold the business into a roll-up and did pretty well, and still waiting for the next pieces that happen with that. But I think there was a time where, again, money was cheap, the economy was pumping, the interest rates were low. It was very easy to pick up money quite cheaply, actually. Anyone looking, like someone trying to, again, if let's say your interest rates are at 0.1%, so you might get 0.5% or 1% of the bank at best. If you can pick up 5, 8 or 10% on private money, people will happily take that. But if you're owning an equity in a business, then you expect a 20% return. If you're venture capital, you're trying to look for if you can borrow your money at less than 10% or 8 or 10% and get a 30% a year return on that money, then it's great arbitrage for you. It's a good way of making money. So what's really happened in last year, Australia and most of the world, the inflation went up quite heavily through the roof. And then following that, obviously interest rates have to go up. So the cost of money is going up. So it's quite funny. You go back 3 years ago, and as long as the business almost had a heartbeat and a pulse, people would just throw money at it and just take it. You'd have a light due diligence, on a smaller business, that is. You'd just make sure that all the tax was paid, super was paid, no major red flags, customers were under contracts or under some sort of agreement, and that could be month to month, but there was at least agreements in place. General, a kind of similar tech stack, didn't matter too much. But yeah, money was kind of almost flowing in that it was really easy to make an ROI on an acquisition. Where again, as the interest rates started to come up, we're seeing some of the top end numbers and multiples starting to soften, definitely. We're seeing a lot heavier due diligence. So don't be wrong, a business with $1 million, $2 million of EBITDA or $5-10 million worth of EBITDA always had proper due diligence on it. But anything under, say, 500K, someone would actually, it's almost like your internal team could do your due diligence without going to a big four or a set of accounting firms and lawyers and whatnot. They just had it down pat and check these major things, make sure the culture seems okay, make sure the owner hasn't done anything dodgy, and it's okay, let's acquire it, let's bolt it on, and we'll clean it up as we go. And it worked. Whereas, as I said, the interest rates have definitely gone up quite a bit. Money's costing a lot more, so people are now, it's okay, well, we better get an ROI on this. We better make sure that this business is clean, because it's not going to be a quick turnaround as it had been historically over the last few years. So deals are still happening, but I think there's a lot more due diligence. There's a bit more care taken, and making sure that the deal does stack up, not just doing it for the sake of doing it.
It's interesting with the inflation numbers, because from my side, a lot of the conversations with people who are doing the acquiring, I've often spoken about as well, was use that 2019 year as an example. It was like getting impossible to drive marketing at that point. There was a lot of those companies that were starting to hit that sort of $20 to $30 million mark, that their marketing engine was generating less leads, getting more difficult to hire staff. So that operational side, it was cheaper in general to just buy the leads and buy the people. And then
that's what's happened over the last couple of years. It was almost like when someone wants to buy something, I often sit down as are you trying to build into a new geography? Are you building a new skill set or a new offering to market that you don't have the skills for at the moment? So if you're an MSP or TSP, you might be getting into Dynamics or CRM or something like that. So you often ask those questions, but a lot of times it's like it didn't matter. They were just like within reason. Don't get me wrong. It's not that that flippant. But yes, it's like, okay, if we might try and hoover up or vacuum up 3 companies in Sydney, or we've got a small office in Brisbane. Let's buy 2 more up there instead of trying to market and try and grow it through traditional and normal methods. Let's just go and acquire something up there that gives you a good foothold or a good base to build on. Which is smart, don't get me wrong. You're trying to get into a new geography or a new region. It does make sense sometimes to buy something, because it does give you a good framework, a good foundation to build upon. You can say that, hang on, you've been in that area for X amount of time, or you've already got staff there, rather than trying to find staff from scratch.
I've got a question for you. If I'm running a typical MSP, let's just say I'm a $2 million revenue business, and I'm doing about 10% EBITDA.
Yep.
You mentioned it's probably going to be somewhere between 2 and 5 times EBITDA multiples. So we're talking between 200. We're talking between 400,000.
400 and a mil. Yep.
What's the difference between those extremes? Like, how am I going to get to the larger side? But what typically drives everyone down to that sort of 2.5, 3 that you were talking about earlier?
Yeah, so you probably wouldn't get a 5 times on something that's doing 2 million, or a business doing 2 million at 10%. It's probably quite rare, or almost. Sorry, if you went back a few years ago, someone might be silly enough to do it. Someone who really needed that income or revenue, or what's the name, just had a hole they needed to fill, they may have done it, but nowadays no. But yeah, the difference, let's say between 2 and 4 maybe in that too, so that's 400,000 to 800,000. There's a couple of different things that make up that, or quite a few different things actually, but the main ones are, can it run without the owner, or how much involvement does the owner have? Like, if the owner is somewhat out of the business, or just doing visionary items, or is seeing and speaking to the odd customer here and there, but most of the new business isn't coming via them, then that's probably gives you a higher multiple. But let's be honest, most of those are 2 million. Most businesses are still owner-led sales, so it's the owner that's the one going out and meeting new customers, probably doing most of the account management, may not be doing all the quoting, but they've probably got a sales admin, a guy or a girl helping out do the quotes, so they're probably not doing all of that work. The other part would be documentation and process and procedure. How well is everything documented in the business? Can someone go and set up a new client and onboard a new customer without basically the owner having to project manage it end to end? How mature are their processes? All of those pieces would definitely make a big difference between getting, say, a 2 times or a 3 times or a 4 times multiple at that point. So it comes down to maturity, comes down to, again, involvement, and it also comes down to, we also look at what's the adjusted EBITDA, as in how much money is the actual owner taking. So it's a perfect example, and I've said this for years on stage or whatnot. Let's say, again, use your $2 million business, making 10% at bottom line. You've got 2 businesses, identical revenue and identical bottom line. If one business is taking a $50,000 a year salary and the other is taking a $200,000 a year salary, which one would you want to buy? From the outside, without knowing that data, they look identical companies. But every day of the week, you'd buy the one with the owner taking 200,000 out, because if you remove the owner from that, which isn't likely, but let's say if you remove them just for simple numbers here, they're now making 400,000 at the bottom line, so they're making 20 points, versus the other business that's only paying the owner 50,000 a year, which you'd say is actually underpaying for that role. So there's something called adjusted EBITDA, which is where we would normally play in or play back and look at how much the owner's taking out of the business through salary, dividends, through running expenses through the business or whatnot, and you'd play them back in, and then you'd also then put in a nominal value or a normalized value for what you'd pay to put a manager in to run that business. So let's say a $2 million business manager, you'd probably expect them getting anywhere between 120 and 150 as an example. That's 120, 150,000 a year. So if they're paying themselves under that, that's actually going to hurt their actual EBITDA as such, and the amount that you could claim as your profitability. Whereas if you're paying over that, you can actually add that back to your profit number or your EBITDA number, and then actually get the multiple on that as well. So that makes a big difference of even how much you're taking out of the business. So there's books around that you should pay yourself first, because you actually do pay yourself first, you'll actually make more money. Or if you pay yourself last, you'll actually make less, because you pay everyone else, and then you're not worried if there's a little bit left over for yourself. So there's books around that type of thing as well.
It's an interesting concept, because I often hear small business owners when I'm talking to them about their business value, where they think they can add back their whole salary and all the expenses they put through their business. And what you just said there, maybe we can explore it a little bit, like that add back of only a part bit of their wages based on a market rate. How does that add back usually work in these types of?
Well, if you're running a $10 million or a $15 million MSP, TSP, and there's a general manager in place and there's a sales manager or BDMs bringing on new business, then there's a better chance of you being able to roll that number back, because at that point in time, you can prove that you're not needed or you're not as critical to the business as everyone else. So, excuse me, at that point in time, yes, you could play a lot of that number back. However, in a small business or a small MSP, TSP, so again, that $2 million type example we're using here, generally the owner is key or is critical in the business at that size. I do know there are examples between that 2 and 5 million where the owner is not active in the business. I have seen them and know of examples of them and know of one looking to sell right now. But it's extremely rare. Normally at that type of size, the owner is key and critical within the business.
Yeah, I think there's a perception thing, isn't there? Like I often hear the owner go, "Oh, I'm not that involved in the business anymore."
Yeah, except nothing happens when they're not there. They have to go and walk out of a meeting. So it's funny. You actually see it at a lot of industry events and probably the Pax8 road shows that you put on as well. There's always the small business owners having to leave the room and in the middle of a session or whatnot to go and take a call with a client, or they've got the laptop out and see them. They're sitting there logged into a server or logged into the back of Office 365 or something like that. They're not taking notes. They're actively working tickets at the time. So, but they're the ones that will believe they're not actually that active in their business because they don't realize it. They think that still going to these industry events while they're working and doing other things is, I've got the time, I can do this, and look what I'm able to do. But it's not the reality.
And this is the hard part of creating the business yourself and building up, because if you reflect back, you might have been doing 80 hours a week and now you're only doing 60. So you are less in the business in reality.
That's right. But you're still more than someone should be. Well, look, don't be wrong. If you're passionate about your business, you can do 100 hours a week, and there's nothing wrong with that. But just identify that and know that. But likewise, you can't expect someone that you're employing or an employee to do the same level of work, the same level of interest in something that they don't own. It doesn't work that way. And that's often the hardest thing that business owners have as well, is that they expect staff or employees to care about the business as much as they do. It's not. It's not their baby. It's not their one thing that they're working on.
Some key points, like just focusing on this owner and not being involved in the business too much. What are some key things that you would say that would show a buyer, apart from having this general manager and a full leadership team, which isn't going to be in a $2 million business?
No, not a $2 million business, no.
What are those sort of key behavioural traits that a buyer would be looking at for a smaller business owner to show that they're not super integral?
Look, process and procedure, definitely good key, like a good admin manager or someone that's handling the accounts side of the business and finance side quite well. And other than they might need to send the bank payments, the owner would need to, or they might need to approve payroll, but they may not be doing those functions. So they have people that can do all those types of functions in their business, which can happen. Those things could also be outsourced. Payroll could easily be outsourced to a small business provider or whatnot. And so they don't have to do it other than send over the timesheets, which admin could do quite easily, or if there's salaries, it's just how many days were they off and sick and annual leave or whatnot, and send those across to be processed. That could easily work. Again, as I said, a lot of process and procedure where a new customer could come on, or the team could actually help onboard a new customer, speak to a new customer from scratch without the owner having to be involved. If the owner is, another way would be and it's almost psychological, in that when you're trying to organize meetings with the person selling, are they available? Or do you have to, hang on, my diary's a bit busy, I need to fit you in here, I need to fit you in here. It's like, no, well, hang on, what are you doing? If you're off, if doing something with family and kids or whatnot, that's one thing. But if you're just seeing customers or any of those types of things, it's like, or you've got to go and visit a key customer at a time that a buyer wants to sit down and speak to you, well, at that point in time, you're kind of proving that you actually are involved or that you are needed versus, hang on, I can, what time do you want to meet? Tuesday, pick any time, Mr. Buyer, in your calendar that suits you, and I'm available. And you could then prove that, okay, well, if you can take that meeting without having to rearrange things or, oh, sorry, I've got a meeting at that time or whatnot, then you are proving at that point in time that you are available. So that's another little example. But a lot of people would never think of that as an example because it's like, oh, my diary is my diary, or going to this event or seeing this person or sitting down with that person or whatnot. They don't ever think that, hang on, for someone coming and buying you or wants to acquire you, that a little data point like that makes a difference.
So speaking of those sort of mindset things, I'm a small business owner. I wake up tomorrow morning and I feel like I'm going to sell my business. Can I just sell my business tomorrow?
Yeah, maybe if you want a 1 times or 1.5 times multiple, you might be able to sell it in the next couple of weeks. Don't get me wrong, like the quickest deals in my history, in my old MSP Correct Solutions, we did do 10 M&As and whatnot. The quickest was 8 days. So yes, it can happen fast, but we kind of knew each other. There was an impetus on his side, unfortunately, a diagnosis that meant that he needed to sell pretty quickly. So we were able to do it in 8 days, and 10 days, within the 2 days after that, his staff were working in our business. So yes, it can happen quickly, but look, let's be honest with you, most conversations that you start don't go anywhere. And even if they do, it's at least 6 months. And then depending on if there's due diligence and whatnot in that, it's minimum 6, often 12 months. Now, if you are thinking of selling, you can't just go and do that tomorrow morning, because you have to go and have conversations with people. You're going to have lowball offers. You're going to have to look at, is your business clean? Is your general ledger clean? Have you got your agreements set up properly? How many vendors are you dealing with? What margin are you making on products and solutions and whatnot? Have you got a good support offering that's scalable, etc.? That takes time. So we normally say to a customer, it's 18 months to prep, or to a client of ours. We cut it up into kind of 3 phases. Each phase is 6 months, but the first 6 months is basically getting in, understanding the business, cleaning up sections of the business, making sure that the product and the go-to-market is clean and easily understood by a buyer or by anyone, including the customers. Make sure the agreements have the right clauses in them. If not, you need to slowly, at renewal with customers, make sure the agreements have got the right clauses ready for a buyer to be able to take over, so such as a sign right. We make sure all those are there. We then clean up extra tools and systems that the company might have and might have had all the way along, but are not using or are barely using. So if you think about it, that cleanup, every dollar you can clean up or every $1,000 you can clean up could equal another $3,000 you get paid for the business. So it's quite funny in that first 6 months, a lot of business owners will start seeing an improvement. We'll start seeing that the business is a bit easier to run because things are getting cleaned up and they're having to deal with things, and they've got someone actually holding them to account to clean these things up. So a lot of times they want to extend that 6 months because they then realize, well, hang on, if I've got a year or two of really good financials, that makes a big difference in your sale. It's like it does. So anyway, that first 6 months can get extended. Second 6 months is actually prepping like an information memorandum, start taking it to market, and then the last 6 months is literally the transaction. So even if you want to do a transaction, by the time it goes through due diligence, lawyers put agreements together. Both sides then decide the bits they do and don't like, get over the couple of no-goes and a couple of hurdles and a couple of roadblocks in there and whatnot. It's 6 months regardless, that last stage. And as much as people want to move it faster, and I've got 2 happening at the moment, and they want to run them quicker and quicker, and I get it, but there's another week disappears, another week's, oh, hang on, we're waiting for some information from a lawyer, or we're waiting for something like that. The other thing that people don't do in that first 6 months is actually sit down with your accountant and sit down and get some tax advice. And how long have you owned the business? And are you going to pay, what type of tax are you going to be paying? And how much does that add up? So you might think, okay, I might get a headline figure of $1 million for my business, or if we use that $2 million business again, so they might get anywhere between $400,000 and $800,000. But how much of that are they going to lose in tax? How much are they going to lose? So they might get a headline figure of $800,000 for the business, but they're going to lose 30% of it. Not me, most times, between cap gains tax, between legal fees, between brokers, anything like that. So we often say you're going to lose a third of it, just to be simple number. So just 240,000 disappearing off that amount. So you're now 560,000 of that 800 in your pocket.
And it's a bit scary, but it's a part of doing business.
It's the reality. Right? That's right.
And this is where I often see a lot of challenges for this sort of small business owner, especially the ones that get it right and start generating, say, that 20% EBITDA, because it's very easily possible in a $2 million business.
Okay.
So running
Definitely.
at 200,000, you're running at $400,000 EBITDA.
Yep.
And you should be taking a fairly hefty salary inside of that. So this is profits after your salary.
Yep.
I see a lot of business owners, when they start getting to that point of I'm generating money, they get stuck in their lifestyle, and then they go get these offers of maybe $800,000 gross, and they go, well, I could make that in 2 years.
That's right.
What do you do in that sort of situation? I'm sure you've come across this a lot.
So if they are making $400,000 a year, then they're going to get more than a 2 times multiple. So yes, it's a bit higher than the 800 that we said just there in that example. But yes, it comes down to, there's probably 2 or 3 parts to that, James. There's one, people should be building wealth outside their business all the way along. So you want a profitable and successful business and be building your wealth outside of that. So it could be through super, through property, through shares. I wouldn't recommend crypto. It's just not my thing. But any of those types of things, like, you should be building wealth along the way. The other thing is also keep in check your spending. It's not just business owners on this. You should always be spending less than you're making. It seems so simple, but most people can't seem to do it. It's like, we need to, and it's interesting through the generational pieces. It's like, what's his name? I'm in my 40s, young 40s. But it's funny watching some of the staff that I had over the years, where our parents and our parents' would do one job for years, or for most of their lives. And if they were paid off their house by the time they by the time they retired, that was a great thing. And then they'd do the one big overseas trip. And that's just what life was. Nowadays, you've got people that want to actually have the nice house, the European cars in their 20s and 30s, and they want to be going overseas not once every 4 or 5 years. They want to be doing it almost every 2 years, and then they want to be doing something like domestically once or twice a year as well. So there's got to come for that. Don't get me wrong, it helps the economy, but at the same token, they're often spending well outside their means, or spending absolutely everything. Then when something happens in their job, economy, anything like that, they then get caught with their pants down. So that happens with business owners as well. They start building all these other things. They don't realize how many expenses they're running through the business, because they might be paying themselves $150,000, and it's almost the play money for them, because their home internets, their home power, all these other random things are put through the business. So they don't have to pay for any of those things until they go and sell the business, and then it's like, oh crap, I don't have as much money as I used to have. I don't have my income. I don't have my dividends. I don't have the business paying or make a lot of these expenses with pre-tax money. So they then have a bit of a problem. So yes, some identify that before the sale, and that's where, again, sometimes they say, well, it's just not worth doing it. And I know people that are in exactly that stage at the moment. They're making an absolute killing in their business, doing really well, and providing a great service, to be clear. But have been doing it for quite some time. And they're looking at, well, is it worth selling or not? And it may not be, but at some point they're going to have to sell the business. At some point, everyone is going to sell their business, whether they like it or not. It could be through, unfortunately, they die. It could be through misfortune. It could be they get a breach or whatnot and customers depart. At some point, you're going to exit your business, whether you like it or not. So you should, along the way, be planning for it, understanding what it looks like, and having a strategy for that. Even if it's a few years away, there's got to still be a strategy there.
I know I'd rather be deliberate about choosing when I sell it rather than getting told when to sell it. And
yep,
I am seeing a lot of business owners checking out. Like, there's that demographic. Most of the owners are in their very late 40s, being generous. To
maybe in the 50s,
60s. Yep. And they've been doing this for 20 years. It's a bloody tough gig.
Mm-hmm.
Very tired. The cybersecurity stuff is rapidly changing, and they can't keep up, and they don't feel like they're in control. And there's huge risks hanging around. I have seen quite a few business owners that thought the business would run without them.
Mm-hmm.
They've checked out, and then the business has collapsed in on themselves because they didn't take the opportunity to sell the business on the top. They thought they could get better. They didn't do anything about it.
Or they had a key person inside the business that's been doing it, looking after it for years, and then they decide they want to leave or go and do something themselves. So at that point in time, the business can implode. This is not the first time it's happened. If we actually think back, the same thing almost happened when cloud came in. or the latest iteration of cloud, let's call it. Because a lot of people at that point in time have been doing traditional IT, on-premise systems, servers, etc. And when the cloud first came in, a lot of people just didn't want to have to deal with it. So they kept making money and then decided to exit rather than having to take that next step and skill up and bring the right resources in and right staff, right systems, etc. to deal with cloud. And it's no different than now. We're seeing it as well with cyber. As everyone's kind of dabbling in cyber and, oh, yeah, we're going to change our antivirus to an EDR or an XDR or a slightly better antivirus or whatnot, and we're now doing cyber. We're great at this. And it's like, it's funny, through the customers I consult with, just not on the sales side, but in the consulting side, it's people what they define as cybersecurity versus it's this massive gamut still. And it will be again and again and again. And as you said there, there's a lot of people that just don't want to take that journey. Let someone else do it. So at that point in time, yes, it's another good time to consider selling. Mind you, there's a lot of buyers out there now, so as much as you might not get the highest multiple, there's still a pretty darn good market if you're selling at the moment because there's a lot of people wanting to buy. But again, as you said there, cyber is that perfect kind of impetus again for people to decide, am I going to invest? And if you're going to do this, you need to do it for a couple of years. Because if you're going to invest in building out a cyber practice, start putting proper cyber security plans together and delivering a good cyber outcome for clients, you can't just do that in 6 months or 12 months. You can't just go and add a couple of products, bolt them onto your current support plans and, hey, we're now perfect. No, it's a process change. It's a mentality change in the business to do it effectively. So, yes, they've either got to decide to kind of almost get out now because they're almost getting to the tail end of it, or they have to, as I said, reinvest back into the business and then make sure it pays off for them in that 3 to 5 year time frame again.
So for a run a scenario by you told us minimum is probably 18 months to do a realistic sale.
Yep. Well, to prep for it well and to get a better outcome. Again, you can exit definitely faster. There's no problems in that, but whether it's the best outcome for you.
It's a way of framing it. Rather than doing a fire sale, we'll do a deliberate
Yes.
good sale. What's it looking like for most sellers? Can they exit as soon as that 18 months is up and they've signed on the dotted line? Is that typical, or are most buyers looking to keep the owners around for a while?
It's a real big mix, to be honest with James, and it depends on the buyer. It depends on if the buyer and the size of the buyer. A lot of them would say 3 months to 6 months. Sometimes it's not uncommon for 12. It's rare for 2 years, and it's probably rare for someone to basically buy out and say leave the next day. So it's not really 6 to 12 months is definitely what you'd see. Basically, it's a little bit of a make sure that the owner doesn't disappear, so customers don't get a spook or a fright or whatnot, and that they're still there and they're involved. They can assist with the customer if they're getting a bit surly or if there's a customer with an issue or whatnot. There's still a little bit of continuity there, and it gives the buyer a little bit of time to bring their culture in, bring their processes in and whatnot before the old owner disappears. Again, some owners want to stay on. They don't necessarily want to exit. They just don't want to have to deal with staff. They don't want to have to deal with the finance side, the back end, banks, and making sure they're profitable and make sure the money keeps coming in. I've got quite a few cases at the moment where the owner actually wants to stay on in a technical role, and they could probably do it pretty darn well. The interesting part will be, though, is when they don't have control anymore in the business, how they're actually going to handle reporting to someone else, because they've not reported to someone in probably quite some time. So that'll be interesting to see. Where others, I know of one that's potentially going to go through in the next 12 months or next 18 months, and they want them to disappear the next day. I don't think that's more of a kind of a partnership type thing where one part is buying someone else out rather than an external party acquiring a business. But yeah, external party buying, you'd normally say 6 to 12 months to be safe. And you'd be talking about that through the due diligence and even in the information memorandum, and you'd be talking about it because if let's say you're that $2 million business and someone that's 3 or 4 million or 5 million acquiring you, they actually might, if you're happy and you're young enough and you're interested, not necessarily young enough, let's say you're interested enough, because I know some older men and women who would love to keep working. They might want to stay on in a strategic role or whatnot, and a buyer might do that. I know we kept the old owners on for quite some time in some of the acquisitions we did. We weren't after getting rid of them straight away. There is a business case for both ways. Depends on how you acquire and what you're trying to achieve out of the acquisition. And on the flip side of that coin, what you as a seller want and how long you're willing to stay around. Because hey, keep still getting your salary, take a lot of the stress off, and it could be a good transition for taking some of that stress off initially, go and find some hobbies, enjoy life and a bit while you have a job as such, and then finally exit. Because that is another big problem for people that have been working 40, 60, 80, 100-hour weeks for years and years and years. They don't have hobbies. They probably don't have much of a life. They have probably a handful of friends outside of the industry and work. A lot of their friends are in the industry and relating to work. And then they go and sell their business. And then 6 months later, they're often then almost depressed and like really unhappy because they've lost the thing that they were passionate about, even though they didn't want to do it anymore and were a bit burnt out. But they've got nothing else to do now. So that's even part of something I do with ARC, like it's what we do as 360, is actually start almost kicking the owner out of their business a bit earlier, even before they've sold it, to start building and start creating a hobby or having something else, another interest outside of the business, which is almost counterproductive when you're trying to prep the business for sale. But it's also about their mental health after the sale and making sure that they're successful and enjoy life rather than, be grumpy post-sale.
Well, I think that's a good point to wrap up on. But I think that's probably not the right way to frame it. It's an insightful point to wrap up on. And we could talk about this for days, this sort of topic.
We could do plenty more sessions about this, and always happy to do them.
I will definitely get you back on to do another session. But if you were to wrap up this sort of conversation, my biggest takeaway from this is it's going to take you at least 2.5 years to fully get out of the business for a good sale. That's the typical lifespan. So if you're thinking about it, start now and actually start doing stuff. That's my takeaway from talking to you. What would you wrap up as your final thought from this?
Don't be scared of getting someone external. Admittedly, this is some of the work I do, but I'm not the only one that does it. But don't be scared of getting someone external involved to help you. Yes, you can do it yourself, but people have done this a number of times. I've been involved now with probably over 45 or 50 M&As, so I've got a little bit of experience. I can tell you where some of the landmines are. Any of the money you spend on someone that's assisting you in selling the business, you can actually write back into your numbers because it's not a normal expense anyway, so it's not really going to hurt your sale. And a lot of times they have contacts to help bring in the more mature buyers that can actually get you a better outcome. That's okay. That wasn't really a pitch. That's just really a professional piece. But yeah, just understand what you're trying to get. Build your kind of non-negotiable list. Start cleaning up the business and start, even if you want to do it yourself, start cleaning up your financials, clean up all those things. Understand all the business or all the personal expenses you're running through the business because they all create add backs. I understand all those things before you start the journey. And if you need to, go and clean those things up before. That's a good starting point.
Well, that's a very big golden nugget to leave everyone off with. So thanks for joining me, Fuzz, and no doubt I'll get you back and we'll continue these sort of conversations.
No problems at all, James. Thank you for having me on.